Dear learners, welcome back to Java interview preparation series. In the last video, we have discussed about the list, and in this video, pretty much I'm just going to discuss about the set interface. Okay, so even with the help of the set interface, right, we are going to store a multiple values because even it is belong to the collection interface. So whenever something belongs to the collection interface, right, so which means it will allow the users to store a multiple values. And the key difference between the list and the set is so in the list we can store a duplicate value, but this set, right, it won't allow the duplicate value. So whenever we try to store a duplicate value, right, it won't allow us to store the duplicate value. So that is the major difference between the list and the set. And in the list, right, so we have discussed about one class called as an array list. But whereas in the set, right, so we are having three different class. So one is of an HashSet class, and next is linked HashSet class, and finally we are having TreeSet. Okay, so these are the different types of classes which is available, and either you can create the object for the respective class, or else as it is of an interface, right, so you can implement those classes with the help of the set interface. Okay, so now let me just write the program and you will understand much better, and you will get to know so what is the difference between the HashSet, linked HashSet, and the TreeSet. Now let me just quickly create the new class file for the set example. Okay, and in which I'm just going to add a main method. Okay, because in a Java, we need to always do the coding only inside the main method. Okay, so now first of all, let me just try to use the hash set. So let me create the object for the hash set. So hash set, and even similar to the list, right, we need to specify the type. So what type of value we are going to store? And if I'm planning to store a numerical value, then I should specify the type as an integer, and let me give the variable name as an hs is equal to new of HashSet. Okay, so now this is done. And how we can add a multiple values? So in the list we have used the add method, right? So similar to that, even in the set we are going to use the add method. But there is another one key difference, in the list, right, it always maintain the insertion order. So we can able to add the value even index specific, but the set, right, it won't store the value in an index order. It always store the value in the random order. Okay, so that is the one another thing. So now let's try to store a multiple values. What is a variable name? It is hs, right? And let me just click on the add, and let me just try to add a multiple values like 34, and hs start add 55, and even let me just try to add few more values so that we can see the output and we can visualize so how this hash set work. Okay, so now I'm using this and I'm 90, and then let me add a sysout statement, and let me just print this hash set. And whenever I right click and run the program, right, it is going to print the output in the console. And as I said, right, this hash set always store the value in the unordered pair. Now if you notice, like it is not maintaining the injection order, so insertion order. So 34, 55, and after which we try to add a 78, but here it's stored as a 90. And after which at final, right, we add 90, but at the final index it is having the 78. So that is what I told, whenever we used to try to use the hash set, right, so it always use the unordered pair. Okay, so it will always store the value in unordered pair. So one another thing is so whenever we are using the set, right, so it will allow us to store the null value as well. So in the hash set, so it will allow one null value. Okay, so for example, like even here, if I say hs dot add, and if I'm just adding to try to add a null, right, it will allow me to store the null value, which means like we can store only one null value. So the reason is like because in a set it won't allow us to store a duplicate values. Now if you notice, it is storing the null value, and everywhere it is stored in an unordered pair. Now is it way is there is any way to make this as an order pair? Yes, even that is possible. So whenever we use this linked hash map, right? So it will maintain the insertion order. Okay, so it always maintain the insertion order, and similar to the hash set, right? It will allow one null value. So we can store one null value. Now let me try to use the linked hash set. Okay, and let me just create the object for it, and this time even I can give the data type as an integer, or even I can just specify the type as an string, and let me give the variable name as lms is equal to, let me create the object for it. Okay, so now I have created an object, and how we can add a multiple values? It is pretty simple. With the help of the add method, and with the help of the add method, let me just try to add some values. So like kind of an LMTI and LMS dot add, let me give learn, and let me add one more thing as well, more. Okay, I have added three string, sorry, three string, and if I try to add a sysout statement, and if I try to print this LMS, right? Okay, now as we have used the linked hash map, right, it always maintain the insertion order. If you notice, first of all, in the first zeroth index the LMTI is stored, and in the learn, right, in the second index, first index learn is stored, and in the second index, sorry, yeah, in the second index the more is stored. Okay, it is maintaining the insertion order, but whereas in the above case, right, it's stored in an unordered pair. And similar to that, like we are having like something called as an like a hash set, sorry, tree set. So what is the purpose of this tree set? So even like it won't allow us to store the duplicate value, but one advantage is like it always maintain the nature order. Okay, so nature order in the sense, so which is nothing but like it will sort the value based upon the ascending order. And here whenever we use this tree set, right, it won't allow us to store a null value. Okay, so the null value is possible to store only in the hash set and the linked hash set, but whereas in the tree set we can't store a null value, and it always sort the values in an ascending order, so which we call it as a natural order. Now let me just create an object for the tree set. Okay, and let me just specify the type as a string. So if it is of an either it is of an string, or if it is of an integer, right, so it will sort in an ascending order. Now let me give some variable name ts is equal to, let me just create an object for the tree set. Okay, and how we can add a value? So only with the help of the add method. Now let me add few values like xyz, and let me add ts dot add abc, and then let me use some other method usa. Okay, so likewise I'm trying to add, and if I add a print statement, and if I try to print this ts, right, and if I try to right click and run this program, okay, so obviously, right, it will sort the values based upon the ascending order. If you notice, like the abc is stored first, usa is stored second, and xyz is stored last, because it is sorting them based upon the ascending order. And in this place, right, instead of the string, if I use the numerical value, so let me just change the type to the integer, and now it is throwing the error because I need to store only the numerical value. I am just storing 67, 23 and 55. Okay, now if I try to rerun the program, so even if it is of a numerical value, it will sort them by the ascending order. And whenever we try to store a null value, right, it won't allow us to store the null value. So that is the key difference between the tree set and the linked hash set and the hash set. Okay, so whenever like someone asks you in an interview, so what is the difference between the hash set and the linked hash set and the tree set? So the thing is like, so whenever we are using the hash set, it will store the values in unordered pair, and the hash set will allow us to store one null value. So similar to that, whenever we use a linked hash set, right? So it will maintain the injection order, which is nothing but the insertion order. So how we inject the values in the similar way, it will store the values. And even in the linked hash set, so we can store one null value. But when it's of a tree set, right, we can't store a null value. And here, and whenever we run the program, right, it will do the sorting. So which is nothing but it will sort the values in a natural order, which is nothing but it will sort the values in the ascending order. Okay, so and what is the key difference between the list and the set is like, so whenever we are using the list, in the list we can store a duplicate values, but whereas in the set, right, we can't able to store a duplicate value. So that is the major difference between the list and set as well. So hope like this video give you the better explanation about the list and set. And even if you have any more queries, right, you can use the comment section. And if you want more example, like I can create more videos in the future. And thanks for watching this video and keep supporting my tutorials.